Well, it's me again, innit? Yeah, another little hiatus from the podcast scene again. Don't really want to over-explain it, but I've been practicing my packing skills recently, so we've got to move house a couple times, which is just really great. Like it's really good to just put all your shit in one place, move it, get to move it again. Like it's just so much fun. So that's been keeping me busy, but I'll get into it today, and it's actually a little bit relevant. Now, obviously, with being quite busy, a bit of inspiration has been quite hard to come by with the podcast. And then I had a call with a client a couple of weeks ago, and it has really, really stuck in my head something he said. Now, this client was really struggling to get to the gym consistently. So I went through the usual things of like, can we reduce the session? Could we maybe have a few less sets? Could we do a few less exercises? And that's when he said to me, it's not the session, it's just getting out the door. And this has been playing in my head ever since. Because once you get going, everything just falls into place, doesn't it? So if we can just break down that first step, then consistency is going to come so much easier. Because we get really bogged down by thinking about the entire process, about, if it's going to the gym, we think about the drive, we think about waiting for the machines, we think about getting changed, we think about having to come home and cook later. Whereas if we can just focus on nailing that first step, it's almost certain that everything else just will fall into place after that. Because I feel like we build all these massive mental mountains that we got to climb. So the walk or the gym session or the cooking becomes such a big burden on your life. But they're actually all so much harder in your head than in reality. So we need to start with the very smallest first possible step and let momentum do the rest. Now, I know that sounds nice on paper, doesn't it? But what can you actually do to make that happen? So the trick is to really get clear on what's the very first step that makes everything happen. And then we can reduce any friction, remove any barriers around this. So for instance, if you're struggling to get to the gym, maybe you could pack your bag the night before and put it by the door. If you're struggling with cooking meals from scratch, maybe you could leave the pots and pans on the counter. If you feel like you're always snacking on the wrong kind of foods, maybe you can put the healthier foods like on display, and those ones you want to eat less of, a bit more out of the way. And then there is one final trick I've got on my sleeve. And full transparency, this will be a bit of promoting myself. But the final piece of the jigsaw is that accountability element. Someone that's checking on you if you actually did the thing, adding some consequences if you don't do it. And that's exactly what I do with my clients. Not in like a school teacher telling off kind of way, but just asking them, did it happen? And often that is enough for them to start doing that thing. It's enough for them to get out the door. So when people start working with me within the peak pathway, what we do is break your big goal down into the very small steps that actually make you get there. And even within those steps, we can make these even smaller. We can reduce these, we can reduce friction around them to make sure they actually happen. And then we'll just review what happened. Again, from a non-judgmental space, I will just ask you whether you did it or not. And I don't mean that as in I'll tell you off if you don't do it, but we'll just understand why you didn't do it. Like what got in the way, what was the reason it didn't happen, and then how can we account for this in the future to make it much more likely that you will do it in the future, if you know what I mean. Because there's always more than one way to do things. There's always a different workaround that we can add with any kind of habit that you're struggling with, any behaviour that you're not quite doing. So if that sounds good, I will leave the inquiry. If that sounds good, I will leave my inquiry form in the show notes. But just to round it off with a really wanky quote, the hardest exercise isn't in the gym. The hardest exercise is the first step out the door. What a twat. I'll see you next week.